Merry Christmas. Come on in, the feast is amazing.
Hello there. Welcome to this very special Christmas evening at Hogwarts. My name is Evan Reed, and I'm so glad you found your way here tonight to the Sleep Wizard's Library. This is a place where magic and calm intertwine, where stories are told softly, gently, to guide you toward the most peaceful sleep. Tonight, I have something truly special prepared for you. A journey into the heart of Hogwarts during the most wonderful time of the year. The castle is draped in snow. The fireplaces are crackling with warmth, and there's a kind of magic in the air that can only be found during Christmas at Hogwarts. Before we begin, I want to share something from my heart. We put so much effort and spent many hours creating this special Hogwarts Christmas story and the magical visuals in the background for you. If these quiet moments bring you peace and guide you to sleep, our small request is to support our channel by leaving a like and subscribing. This is our biggest motivation to keep creating these special pieces of content for you. Your support means the world to us, truly. Now I invite you to get comfortable. Adjust your pillows, pull your blankets close, and let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the day fall away from your shoulders. Tonight, you're safe, you're warm, and you're about to experience the wonder of a Hogwarts Christmas. Close your eyes if you wish, or let them rest gently on the flickering firelight. Let my voice carry you through snow-covered corridors, past enchanted portraits, and into a story of kindness, discovery, and the quiet magic that lives in unexpected places. Are you ready? Then, let us begin. The lost Christmas gift of Hogwarts. The Great Hall had never looked more beautiful. Hermione Granger stood at the entrance, her breath catching softly in her throat as she took in the magnificent sight before her. 12 towering Christmas trees lined the walls, each one dressed in shimmering silver and gold, with enchanted icicles that never melted, hanging like frozen tears of starlight. The ceiling above, bewitched to reflect the sky outside, showed a tapestry of deep midnight blue, scattered with stars that twinkled with unusual brightness, as if they too were celebrating the season. Soft snow fell from nowhere and everywhere, disappearing just before it touched the longhouse tables below. The flakes drifted down in a gentle, endless dance, catching the light from thousands of floating candles. It was hypnotic, peaceful, the way they turned and twisted in the warm air. It was Christmas Eve at Hogwarts, and Hermione had chosen to remain at the castle for the holidays. Harry and Ron had stayed as well, along with a handful of other students who had their own reasons for not returning home. The evening's feast had been spectacular. Roast turkey with all the trimmings, honey-glazed ham, mountains of roast potatoes, still steaming with butter, Yorkshire puddings golden and perfect, followed by flaming Christmas puddings and Professor Dumbledore's favorite crystallized pineapple. Now, the feast had ended, and students were slowly making their way back to their common rooms, their bellies full, their hearts warm, their voices carrying softly through the corridors in contented conversation. Hermione lingered a moment longer, watching as Professor Flitwick directed the remnants of the feast to clear themselves away with a complex series of wand movements. The tiny professor stood on a stack of books, conducting the dishes as if they were an orchestra, and they responded beautifully, swirling into neat stacks before vanishing into the kitchens below. She smiled to herself, pulling her burgundy scarf a little tighter around her neck. The castle was drafty in winter. Despite the many fires blazing and hearths throughout Hogwarts, but it was a pleasant kind of cold, the sort that made you appreciate warmth all the more. Finally, she turned and made her way toward Gryffindor Tower, her footsteps echoing softly against the ancient stone floors. The corridors were quieter now, emptier. Most students had already retreated to their common rooms or dormitories. The portraits on the walls were drowsy, some already snoring softly in their frames, their painted chests rising and falling with imagined breath. One witch in a silver frame gave Hermione a sleepy wave as she passed, and Hermione waved back, smiling. The castle felt different at night, especially during the holidays. It felt older somehow, more mysterious, as if the very stones remembered every Christmas that had ever been celebrated within these walls. 7 floors of history, of laughter and learning, of magic, both great and small. As she rounded a corner near the library, something caught her eye. There, on the floor beside a suit of armor, was a small package. Hermione slowed, then stopped, tilting her head curiously. The package was wrapped in brown paper that had gone soft with age, tied with string that might once have been red, but had faded to a dusty pink. It was no larger than a thick book, rectangular and flat, and it looked as though it had been sitting there for quite some time, forgotten. She glanced around. The corridor was empty. No one else was near. Bending down, she picked up the package carefully. It was surprisingly light, and as she turned it over in her hands, she noticed something pressed into the wax seal on the back. A crest, the Hogwarts crest, but different somehow. Older. The lion, the eagle, the badger, and the serpent were all present, but the style was simpler, more medieval, as if this seal had been made long before the current version had been designed. There was no name on the package, no indication of who it was for or who it was from. Hermione frowned slightly, her curiosity thoroughly awakened now. She was a problem solver by nature, someone who couldn't resist a mystery, particularly one that appeared to have no obvious answer. This package had been lost. That much was clear, but by whom? And when? And what was inside? She knew she should probably take it to Professor McGonagall, or perhaps leave it with Madame Pince in the library. Lost property should be returned to its rightful owner, after all. But something made her hesitate. Perhaps it was the season, the magic of Christmas, that made everything feel a little more possible. Perhaps it was the way the starlight from a nearby window fell across the old paper, making it seem to glow from within. Or perhaps it was simply that Hermione had always believed that some mysteries were meant to be solved by the person who discovered them. She tucked the package carefully under her arm and continued walking. But instead of heading toward Gryffindor Tower, she found her feet carrying her in a different direction entirely, toward the library. The library was closed, of course, but Hermione had been there so many times that she knew exactly which stone to press near the entrance to make the door swing open without so much as a creak. Madame Pince had shown her once, during Hermione's second year, when the librarian had recognized a kindred spirit in the bushy-haired Gryffindor who treated books with the reverence others reserved for sacred relics. The interior of the library was dark, save for the moonlight streaming through the tall windows. It painted everything in shades of silver and shadow. The long rows of bookcases, the study tables, the comfortable chairs near the fireplace that had long since gone cold. Hermione whispered, lumos, and the tip of her wand ignited with a soft, warm light. She held it aloft, and shadows retreated before her, like respectful courtiers making way for a queen. She made her way to one of the study tables and set the package down carefully, pulling out a chair and sitting before it as if it were an exam paper, requiring her full attention. For a long moment, she simply looked at it. The brown paper was rough beneath her fingertips, handmade, the kind that wasn't produced anymore. The string was natural fiber, twisted and retwisted by hand, and that seal, that ancient seal, spoke of a time when Hogwarts was younger, when magic was practiced differently, when the castle itself was still learning what it would become. Hermione had never been one to open other people's mail. But this wasn't exactly mail, was it? This was something lost, something forgotten, and if she was going to find its owner, she would need to know what was inside. She took a breath, then carefully, gently, began to untie the string. It came away easily, almost eagerly, as if it had been waiting for this moment. The paper unfolded like petals, revealing what lay within. It was a journal, small, leather-bound, with pages that had yellowed with age. The cover was embossed with a simple design, a badger, the symbol of Hufflepuff House. There was no title, no author's name, just that single proud badger standing on its hind legs, forever frozen in mid-stride. Hermione opened the journal carefully, afraid the pages might crumble at her touch. But they were surprisingly sturdy, protected perhaps by some long-ago preservation charm. The handwriting inside was neat and careful, the letters formed with the precision of someone who had been taught penmanship as an art form. The ink had faded to a warm brown, but the words were still perfectly legible. December 20th, 1927 today was our last day of classes before the Christmas holidays. Professor Merrythought assigned us an essay on the proper use of defensive spells in domestic settings. 12 inches due the first week of term. I've already finished mine, of course. Eloise says I'm insufferable, but she says it fondly, I think. The castle is beautiful this time of year. The house elves have outdone themselves with the decorations. There are enchanted snowflakes that sing carols when you walk beneath them, and the suits of armor have been dressed in little red scarves. It makes them look less frightening, more friendly. I've decided to stay at Hogwarts for Christmas this year. Mother and Father understand. They know how much I love it here, how this place feels more like home than home itself sometimes. Is that terrible to admit? Perhaps, but it's true. Hermione's heart gave a small, sympathetic flutter. She knew exactly what the writer meant. Hogwarts had a way of becoming home, of wrapping itself around your heart until you couldn't imagine being anywhere else. She turned the page, reading on. The journal entries continued through that December, detailing quiet days at Hogwarts during the Christmas break. The writer, a Hufflepuff student whose name was never mentioned in the entries themselves, wrote about walks through the snow-covered grounds, about helping Professor Beery tend to his precious plants in the greenhouse, about long evenings in the common room, playing gobstones with the few other students who had stayed behind. It was peaceful, reading these entries, like looking through a window into the past, watching shadows of people who had long since grown old, or perhaps passed on entirely. But then, as Hermione continued reading, she came across an entry that made her pause. December 24th, 1927, something wonderful happened today. I was in the kitchens. I often go there to visit the house elves. They're such dear creatures, and I met the newest addition to the Hogwarts staff, a young house elf named Boppy, who had just arrived from the Hufflepuff family estate to serve at the school. Boppy was frightened, overwhelmed by the size of the castle and the number of students. The other house elves were kind to him, of course, but he seemed so small, so lost. I sat with him for a while, and we talked. I told him about Hogwarts, about the beauty of the place, about how everyone here becomes family eventually, no matter where they come from. He seemed comforted by that. Before I left, I gave him a gift, a small brass button from my winter coat. I told him it was for luck, and that whenever he felt lonely, he could hold it and remember that he had a friend here. He cried. House elves are such emotional creatures, bless them. He promised to keep the button safe, to treasure it always. I think I've made a friend for life. Hermione closed the journal slowly, her mind racing. A house elf named Boppy, a brass button given as a Christmas gift, and this journal, lost for decades, wrapped and sealed as if it had been meant as a present itself, never delivered. She stood abruptly, the chair scraping softly against the stone floor. She knew what she had to do. She had to find Boppy. The kitchens at Hogwarts were located down a broad, stone staircase near the entrance to the Hufflepuff common room. Hermione had been there several times before. Once during second year when she, Harry, and Ron had been investigating the Chamber of Secrets, and several times since then, usually when she needed a quiet place to think or wanted to bring leftovers to the house elves, who always seemed delighted by her visits. The entrance was concealed behind a painting of a bowl of fruit. You had to tickle the pear, and it would giggle and transform into a green door handle. Hermione did so now, and the door swung open, revealing the enormous kitchen beyond. Even at this late hour, it must have been past 11 o'clock, the kitchen was bustling with activity. House elves were everywhere, cleaning the last of the feast dishes, preparing breakfast for the morning, restocking shelves, and generally maintaining the complex operation that was feeding hundreds of students and staff 3 meals a day. The moment Hermione stepped inside, several elves noticed her and came hurrying over, their large eyes bright with welcome. "Miss Hermione Granger," squeaked an elf, Hermione, recognized as Dibby. "What brings you to the kitchen so late? Can Dibby get you something? Tea? Biscuits? A nice bit of Christmas cake?" "No, thank you, Dibby," Hermione said warmly. "I'm actually looking for someone. I was wondering if you might know of a house elf named Boppy." The effect of this question was immediate and surprising. The elves nearby went very quiet, very still. They exchanged glances with one another, and something passed between them. Something sad and tender and old. "Boppy," Dibby repeated softly. "Yes, miss. We knows Boppy, but Boppy doesn't work in the kitchens anymore." "Boppy is retired, miss." "Retired?" Hermione echoed, surprised. She hadn't known house elves could retire. "Yes, miss. Boppy is very, very old now. He worked at Hogwarts for 70 years. He did. Longer than most. Professor Dumbledore told him he could rest, that he had earned it. Boppy has a room, miss, up in the East Tower. He spends his days there now, quiet-like. Could you take me to him?" Hermione asked. "I have something that I think belongs to him, something that was lost a long time ago." The elves looked at each other again, and then Dibby nodded slowly. "Dibby will take you, Miss Hermione. Follow Dibby, please." The journey to the East Tower took them through parts of Hogwarts that Hermione had rarely visited. The corridors here were narrower, the ceilings lower, the stones worn smooth by centuries of passage. This was one of the oldest parts of the castle, she realized, one of the original structures around which everything else had been built. Dibby moved quickly, despite his small size, his bare feet making no sound against the floor. Hermione followed, clutching the journal carefully under her arm. They climbed a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever, winding up and up into the tower. Finally, they reached a small landing with a single wooden door. It was plain, unadorned, but someone had hung a small wreath of holly on it, the berries bright red even in the dim light. Dibby knocked. 3 soft taps. "Master Boppy," he called gently. "Master Boppy, there is a visitor for you, a kind miss from Gryffindor." There was a long pause, and then a voice, thin and wavering with age, but still carrying a note of curiosity, called out, "A visitor? For Boppy? At this hour?" "Yes, Master Boppy." Should Dibby send her away? No, no. If someone has come all this way, Boppy will see them. Come in, come in." Dibby pushed the door open and gestured for Hermione to enter. She stepped inside, and Dibby gave her an encouraging nod before disappearing back down the stairs. The room was small, but incredibly cozy. A fire burned merrily in a miniature fireplace, casting dancing shadows across walls that were lined with shelves. The shelves were filled with curious objects, buttons of every size and color, bits of ribbon, smooth stones, pressed flowers, tarnished spoons, and 100 other small treasures that most people would have considered rubbish, but which clearly meant the world to the room's occupant. In a rocking chair by the fire sat the oldest house elf Hermione had ever seen. Boppy's skin, which had probably once been a healthy gray-brown, had faded to something closer to parchment. His ears, usually bat-like and perky on younger elves, drooped slightly with age, but his eyes, those enormous eyes, were still bright, still sharp, still filled with that particular house elf quality of boundless devotion and gentle wisdom. He wore a remarkable collection of clothing, 7 scarves of different colors, 4 pairs of socks, 2 on each foot, a tea cozy that served as a hat, and what appeared to be a small tablecloth fashioned into a robe. He looked absurd and dignified all at once. "Good evening," Hermione said softly, moving into the room. "I'm Hermione Granger. I'm so sorry to disturb you so late." "Boppy is not disturbed," the old elf said, his voice warm. "Boppy does not sleep much anymore. The young need sleep. The old just need their memories. Please, Miss Granger, sit." He gestured to a cushion near the fire, and Hermione settled onto it, adjusting her robes around her. "Boppy knows who you are," the elf continued, his eyes twinkling. "Miss Hermione Granger, friend to Harry Potter. The clever one, the kind one, the one who worries about house elves." Hermione felt herself blush slightly. Yes, I suppose I do. It is good to worry," Boppy said sagely. "Worry means you care. Caring is the most important magic there is." He rocked gently in his chair, waiting, patient as stone. Hermione took a breath. "I found something tonight. A package, wrapped in old paper, sealed with the Hogwarts crest. Inside was a journal, a diary from 1927, written by a Hufflepuff student, and in that journal, there was an entry about a young house elf named Boppy, who had just come to work at Hogwarts. The student gave this elf a brass button as a Christmas gift for luck and friendship. As she spoke, she watched Boppy's face. The old elf had gone very still, his eyes widening, his wrinkled hands gripping the arms of his rocking chair. "Are you that Boppy?" Hermione asked gently. For a long moment, the elf said nothing. Then, slowly, he reached up and pulled down one of his many scarves, a green one, faded and worn. He unfolded it carefully, reverently, and there, pinned to the inside, was a small brass button, tarnished with age, but still intact. "Boppy, is that Boppy?" he whispered, and Boppy has kept his button safe, just as he promised. For 70 years, Boppy has kept it. Tears were forming in those enormous eyes, spilling down his wrinkled cheeks. Hermione felt her own eyes sting with sympathy. She held out the journal. "Then this belongs to you. It was lost, but I found it, and I think it was meant to be a Christmas gift for you." Boppy took the journal with trembling hands, holding it as if it were made of spun glass and moonbeams. He opened it, and his eyes moved across the familiar handwriting, reading the words written by someone he had known long ago. "Eloise," he breathed. "Miss Eloise Thornberry. Such a kind girl, such a bright, warm soul. You remember her?" "Boppy remembers everyone who was ever kind to him," the old elf said simply. "But Miss Eloise was special. She was the first student who saw Boppy not as a servant, but as a person, the first who sat with him and talked to him as a friend." He turned the pages slowly, carefully, reading entries here and there, his expression shifting between joy and sorrow, memory and loss. "What happened to her?" Hermione asked softly. "To Miss Thornberry. She finished her schooling," Boppy said. "She became a healer at St. Mungo's. A good one. She saved many lives. She married, had children, grandchildren. She lived a long, good life." Boppy heard news of her over the years, through other elves, through whispers and letters. She died 12 years ago, peacefully, in her sleep. "I'm sorry," Hermione whispered. "Don't be sorry, miss. She had a good death, after a good life. That is all anyone can hope for." He paused, then added, "But Boppy always wondered why she never wrote to him. They had been such friends. That Christmas, Boppy thought perhaps she had forgotten him. Once she left Hogwarts, it hurt, a little, but Boppy understood. Humans have so many important things to remember. A house elf is a small thing to forget." "But she didn't forget you," Hermione said, understanding dawning. "She made this journal for you. She wrote down all her memories of that Christmas, of your friendship. She wrapped it as a gift. She must have meant to give it to you before she left, but somehow it got lost. Somehow it never reached you." Boppy looked down at the journal, his tears falling freely now, spotting the old pages. "She remembered," he whispered. "She remembered Boppy." "She did," Hermione confirmed, her own voice thick with emotion, "and she wanted you to know how much your friendship meant to her. That's the real gift, isn't it? Not the journal itself, but knowing that you mattered to her, that you were important." The old elf nodded, unable to speak, clutching the journal to his chest, as if it were the most precious thing in the world. They sat together in silence for a while, the fire crackling softly, the snow falling outside the small tower window. It was a comfortable silence, the kind that exists between people who understand each other without needing words. Finally, Boppy looked up, wiping his eyes with one of his many scarves. "Miss Hermione," he said, You have given Boppy a great gift tonight. The greatest gift Boppy has received since that button, 70 years ago. Boppy thanks you. Boppy thanks you from the bottom of his old, tired heart. Hermione smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with the fire. I'm glad I could return it to you. It deserved to find its way home. Everything deserves to find its way home, Boppy agreed, especially at Christmas. He set the journal carefully on a small table beside his rocking chair, positioning it where he could see it easily. Then he looked at Hermione with an expression of deep thoughtfulness. Boppy would like to give you something, Miss Hermione. A Christmas gift. For a Christmas gift. Oh no, that's not necessary, Hermione began. But Boppy held up one wrinkled hand. It is necessary, he said firmly. It is right. Wait here, please. He climbed down from his rocking chair and shuffled over to one of his shelves. He spent a moment searching, moving objects aside with gentle care, muttering to himself. Then he made a small sound of triumph and returned, holding something in his closed fist. Hold out your hand, miss. Hermione did so, and Boppy dropped something into her palm. It was a small crystal, no larger than her thumbnail, perfectly clear and smooth. It caught the firelight and seemed to hold it, glowing softly from within. What is it? Hermione asked, turning it this way and that, watching the light shift and change. It is a memory keeper, Boppy said. Very old magic. House elf magic. If you hold it and think of a memory you wish to keep forever, a moment of kindness, a feeling of happiness, a time when you felt loved, the crystal will remember it for you. And later, if you are sad or lonely, or if the world seems too dark, you can hold the crystal and it will remind you of that moment. It will remind you that good things exist, that love is real, that you are not alone. Hermione looked down at the crystal, then back at Boppy, her eyes shining. Thank you, she whispered. I'll treasure it. Always. Good, Boppy said, satisfied. He climbed back into his rocking chair, settling in with a contented sigh. Now, Boppy must ask Miss Hermione to leave him alone for a bit. Boppy has much reading to do, 70 years of reading to catch up on. He picked up the journal again, opening it to the first page, and his face softened into an expression of pure, peaceful joy. Hermione stood, brushing off her robes. Merry Christmas, Boppy, she said softly. Merry Christmas, Miss Hermione Granger, the old elf replied, not looking up from the journal. And thank you for bringing her back to Boppy. Even if it is only her words, it is enough. It is more than enough. Hermione slipped out of the room, closing the door gently behind her. The journey back through the castle felt different. Somehow, the corridors seemed warmer, the shadows less dark. The portraits she passed were awake now, watching her with knowing expressions, as if they understood that she had just been part of something special, something magical, in a way that had nothing to do with spells or potions. She made her way back toward Gryffindor Tower, the crystal safe in her pocket, her heart full. As she walked, she thought about Eloise Thornberry, a girl she had never met, but felt she knew, a Hufflepuff who had seen the humanity in everyone, even those most people overlooked, a girl who had become a healer, who had spent her life caring for others, who had never forgotten a friendship made during one Christmas holiday long ago. She thought about Boppy, who had kept a brass button safe for 70 years, who had devoted his life to serving others, who had retired to a tower room filled with treasures that others would call rubbish, but which represented every small kindness he had ever been shown, and she thought about the magic of connection, of kindness, of the invisible threads that bind people and elves together across time and distance. This, she thought, was the real magic of Hogwarts, not the spells they learned in class, not the potions they brewed, or the charms they practiced, but this, the understanding that every person, every creature, every soul that passed through these ancient halls was worthy of love, worthy of respect, worthy of remembering. She reached the portrait of the fat lady, who was wide awake and looking distinctly curious. "Well," the portrait said, "you look like you've been on an adventure." "Just a small one," Hermione said, smiling. "The best adventures are often the small ones," the fat lady replied wisely. "Password? Fortuna Major." The portrait swung open, revealing the Gryffindor common room beyond. The fire was still burning brightly, and Harry and Ron were there, playing wizard chess, so absorbed in their game that they barely looked up when she entered. "Where have you been?" Ron asked, moving his knight. "You've been gone for ages." "Oh, just returning something that was lost," Hermione said vaguely. She settled into one of the squashy armchairs near the fire, pulling the memory crystal from her pocket and holding it up to catch the light. "What's that?" Harry asked, glancing over. "A Christmas gift," Hermione said softly, "from a friend." She closed her eyes, the crystal warm in her hand, and thought about tonight. She thought about an old elf in a tower room, reading words written by someone who had loved him. She thought about a brass button kept safe for 70 years. She thought about the journal she had found, the mystery she had solved, and the profound satisfaction of knowing she had brought something precious back to where it belonged. The crystal seemed to pulse gently once, as if acknowledging that the memory was now safely stored. When she opened her eyes, Harry and Ron had gone back to their chess game. The fire crackled softly. Snow continued to fall outside the windows, silent and eternal. It was Christmas Eve at Hogwarts, and all was exactly as it should be. Later, much later, when the common room had emptied and Hermione had finally made her way up to bed, she lay in her four-poster with the curtains drawn, the crystal resting on the bedside table where she could see it. Through the window of the dormitory, she could see the stars, the same stars that had looked down on Eloise Thornberry 70 years ago, the same stars that had witnessed countless Christmases at Hogwarts, countless friendships made, and memories created. She thought about what Boppy had said. Everything deserves to find its way home. And she thought about how Hogwarts was more than just a school. It was a keeper of stories, a guardian of memories, a place where the past and present existed side by side, connected by threads of love and kindness that never truly faded, no matter how many years passed. The true gift of Hogwarts wasn't the magic they taught here, though that was wonderful. The true gift was the reminder that every act of kindness mattered, every friendship was precious, and every soul, no matter how small or forgotten, deserved to be remembered. Hermione reached out and touched the crystal one more time, feeling its warmth, its promise. Tomorrow was Christmas Day. There would be presents to open, a feast to enjoy, snowball fights in the grounds, and laughter in the common room. But tonight, in this quiet moment, between waking and sleeping, she held on to the gift she had been given, the knowledge that she had made a difference, that she had brought joy to someone who deserved it, that she had solved a mystery, not with cleverness alone, but with empathy and care. Outside, the snow continued to fall, soft and steady, covering the castle in a blanket of white. The stars twinkled, the wind whispered through the towers, and in a small room in the east tower, an old house elf sat reading by firelight, tears of happiness on his wrinkled cheeks, holding a journal that proved he had been loved, that he had mattered, that he had never been forgotten. It was, Hermione thought, as sleep finally claimed her, the most perfect Christmas gift of all. And in the morning, when she woke, the crystal on her bedside table was glowing softly, holding the memory safe, ready to remind her, whenever she needed it, that magic comes in many forms, and the most powerful form of all is kindness. Merry Christmas, Hogwarts. Merry Christmas to all. The end.